Hi, everybody. This is A.R.S.E, Around the Center Explains, and today we're going to talk about truth versus perspective. And what I mean is just like, in my opinion, there's only one truth. I mean, there's the truth, and then there's perspective, meaning your interpretation of that truth, or your view of that truth, or how that truth affects you, how you describe that truth. That's perspective. But what's true is true. There's, like with mathematics. The reason why um, it's always okay, like 1 plus 1 is 2. There's one thing, no matter how you describe it, whatever language you use, there's one object, that's one. You add another one, that's two, three, four, and then from there you add in, other uh, functions, whatever, what I'm saying, algebra, geometry, uh, trig, calculus, statistics, whatever, you take those same numbers, those same basic uh, 10 numbers, or 0 through 9, and you do a lot of things with them, but they all have that intrinsic value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and of course 0. Um, so how that relates to perspective is like, you could look at, okay, like calculus, calculus 1 1, all of A equals all of B, right? And it's drawn or articulated with A with a circle around the arrow, a looping arrow, to a B with a circle around that. So all of A equals all of B, right? Meaning what you start with is what you end up with. And the arrow represents the function, whether it be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, whatever, what I'm saying? And so basically, you could, that relates to sociology wise, is tell me who you are and I'll tell you how you react to a situation, basically, what I'm saying? That's what that means, I think, to me anyways. All of A equals all of B. Like the first time I saw that equation written out, the A with the circle, the arrow, and the B with the circle, that's what I thought was like, oh, that's people, like who you are in the beginning is going to be uh, is going to be directly a direct correlation to who you are after the experience, or whatever. And I think that's more true than people realize. All of A equals all of B. So anyways, though, so truth versus perspective, and what I mean is just like, you could believe something and that doesn't make it true, and something could be true and you don't believe it. For example, earlier I was debating somebody about Moses, and this is what got me to think about this. And I was trying to explain to them how Sargon the Great was the basis for Moses. Moses never existed, and they're all like, "I need, what was the phrase they used? Uh, what did they say? I need something about consensus. Oh, academic consensus. You know, so in a forum where you can't even see each other. This is online speaker, like whatever, a live stream. He wanted like a dissertation on how Moses never existed, and how the basis for that story is Sargon the Great, which I try to explain to him. But every time I try to explain to him, like, hey, dude, there's an empire, by the name of Acadia that existed, pre-Bronze Age collapse. And every time I got it, like, I would get like 2 words in, and he would interrupt me. He's also, where's the academic consensus? And I'm all like, bro, like, could I, anyways, though, what I'm trying to say is just like, your perspective isn't true, always. And the truth doesn't always agree with your perspective, but it's always true. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm well aware of that. Like, maybe, the thousands of books I read and drew my conclusions from are not the equivalent of the one book that this guy read, the Bible. suppose, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, this dude read one book and dedicated his life to studying one book. I started with the oldest written story, and beyond that, like, I've learned, what traditionally oral stories going back thousands of years, and all those stories, thousands of stories that I know, read, studied, uh, makes are inconsequential to this guy memorizing one passage in a book, in one book. You feel me? Like, anyways, like I told him, like, this is what I basically kept trying to say with, like, that there is something known as a fact. That's what, I'm saying, a factual, we could, definitions of words, etymology. Anyways, though, so, like, uh, in the current climate where, everybody has their own, what's described as, oh, this is my own truth. No, like, you are taking a mental shortcut to avoid the responsibility of critical thinking. See, my one contention with religious people is that, I like my positive view with religion is that it is a morality guide. There is something in there, like, don't be a dick, what I'm saying, basically, which is cool, what I'm saying, I appreciate that. But the other thing is that, like, this isn't, shit, you know, like, people who think that their religion is the only religion and that you gotta agree with them, or you're wrong, you're gonna go to hell, or they, whatever. And it's just like, how do I explain it? Oh, okay. So the lack of critical thinking, that's my one negative view of religion. Like, it encourages people not to think. Like, that's, oh, put it in, trust God. Like, oh, fuck, I hate that fucking phrase. Anyway, though, what I'm saying is just like, bro, say, okay, even if God existed, I'm not saying he does or he doesn't. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm just a person, Like, I'm just a dude that's read a lot. I get high and I like to think about shit. And then, I made this channel so I could talk about it because, like, in reality, some of the people around me, they don't understand the shit that I talk about. Maybe because it doesn't make sense, or maybe because, you know, whatever. Like, it just is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm one of those people, I'm still searching for my community, I guess. That's why I'm here right now. But the thing is, it's like, what I feel is true is not based on what I believe. It's based on what I've studied and read. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I was trying to get through. Because, like, my argument to him was like, dude, you read one book and you made it your whole personality, which is, what a lot of religious people do. And then he's all like, well, how did you learn what you learned? And I'm all like, well, I read a book, though. So you made that. I'm like, no, I read a book among many. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying, like, just because you read something that makes it true. What I'm trying to say is just, like, not every book is the same. I mean, there's Cat in the Hat. That's a book. And then there's the Northern Anthology of Ancient Literature, Volume 1, which is a 4,000 plus page tome of the oldest known written stories, all categorized and interpreted, by the authors, by a collection of, not just a author, but a collection of, literature experts. And so the original story, there's a brief interpretation, and then another story, and so on and so forth. And I'm talking like stories that 4,000-year-old Chinese poetry, 2,500-year-old Greek plays, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest known written story, which is about 5,000 years old. Tale of the Lost Sailor, one of the oldest known Egyptian stories, which is about 4,000 years old, which I've covered in another video, which is one of my favorite videos. And then, but what I'm trying to say about truth versus perspective is, it's like, there's truth. Like I said, the number one representing one object, that'll always be true. You know what I'm saying? No matter how you perceive it, or your opinion of the object in question, you know what I'm saying, or how you feel about the object in question, is irrelevant. That's perspective. You know what I'm saying? And your perspective may feel true to yourself, but that's because it is what it is. Like I said, like what I believe, I feel is true. You know what I'm saying? And like I could be wrong. You know, like some of my opinions that are not really backed by academic consensus, but I feel are true from what I've understood and read about history. Is that 13,000 years ago there was a civilization in North America that was, I wouldn't say advanced, but they had a specialist, I guess. You know what I'm saying? Division of labor, a society. You know, and those people were affected by the Upper Dryas, which there's a lot of papers written on. The mythology aspect of my beliefs that are, because I read a lot of mythology, is that starting with Icarus and ending with the goddess Sedna of the Inuit people, all these stories are referenced to the Upper Dryas event, which was a comet that hit the Pacific, I believe, according to the Inuit, who say in their story of the goddess Sedna that she was in a canoe in the sky, her fingers got cut off, they fell into the ocean, and she herself fell into the ocean, which I think was a description of the comet and its accompanying smaller pieces, all striking the earth. I mean, not just in the ocean, like the smaller pieces hit along, I think, or even there was a couple airbursts. Those of you who are aware of the event in Russia in the early 1900s, the airburst that leveled all that square mileage of trees, like, those. So the Taurid meteor shower would used to be a lot more intense. And that's what it's thought to have caused. Oh, shit. You know what? I'm getting distracted. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah, I'll cover that. Like I said, I'll cover that before. I don't want to go off on another tangent. We're talking about truth. So what's true is this. Is like I said, what I believe to be true, that there was a civilization pre-Upper Dryas. There was another civilization between the Upper and Younger Dryas, which was a period of about 1,200 years. And then there was the solar event that caused the Younger Dryas, which burned the earth with a week's month-long lightning storm, melted the glaciers that formed after the Upper Dryas, and caused a polar shift, a 15-degree polar shift, which caused a whole nother wave of destruction. Which I said, I've covered all this in other videos. But what I'm trying to say is this, like, this is all based on scientific research. It's not and mythology and my interpretation of the mythology that I've studied, over the last 28 years. Like I said, I took ancient literature in college, and I pretty much spent most of my life, my free time, trying to read everything I could get my hands on. That's older than the Guggenheim printing press, before the year 1500. Everything basically from the Epic of Gilgamesh until the year 1500. If it was written in that time frame, which is about 4,500 years, I've tried to read, including some of the translated of the tens of thousands of Akkadian tablets that exist pre-Bronze Age era in West Asia. So anyways, like I said, what I believe might not be true. I'm well aware of that. Like I said, anybody that goes into physics, any serious physicist, or anybody in any serious scientist will tell you that we don't know what we don't know. Especially when it comes to deep space. You know what I'm saying? Like I've said this before about observational science. If you equate 1 year and 1 second, and you look out your window for 1 minute, which, in this metaphor would be 60 years, you would have to describe where everything you see was 420 years ago, right? So 1 minute of observation, and you got to tell me where everything you see was 420 years ago. If the universe is 13 billion years, 13.8 billion years old, or whatever, And then, if the universe is 26 billion years old, which is a number that's been posited recently, you would have to describe with that 1 minute of observation where everything was 825 years ago. So look out your window for a minute, time yourself, and then tell me where everything you see was 420 years ago or 825 years ago. That's what we're doing with modern science. With those 60 years of observation with modern scientific equipment, we're trying to figure out what happened either 13.8 billion years ago with the Big Bang or 26 billion years ago with, like I said, which is a number that's been recently uh, put up as an age for the universe. Um, Also, uh, okay. Anyways, so like I said, truth versus perspective. There's only one truth. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of perspectives. Everybody has their own perspective. Currently, I would say there's about 8 billion plus perspectives on this planet. Some of them are aligned, some of them don't. Doesn't make any of them true. They could be true, but that doesn't make them inherently true. You know, a perspective. Um, and like semantics. This is the other thing. Like the reason why people want to confuse language, you know, especially recently, like they want to confuse what the definition of words actually are, is because they know inherently that they are arguing from a basis of falsehood, you know. So their only tactic, you know, is to muddy the water, you know what I'm saying? But like I said, like I was talking to this person earlier, trying to explain to them that for the history of West Asia, there's the records of 5 empires that exist versus one book that was written down thousands of years after the fact and rewritten many times since, you know. And I don't know, like I said, you know, religious people, they could be cool, you know what I'm saying? Like my issue with them a lot of the time is, like I said, the lack of critical thinking. Like their their penchant to take every fact that they learn and make it force it into proving their religion, you know, like the square peg and the round hole type of thing. Like the Black Sea inundation being the basis for the flood in the story, Noah's flood. Um, you know, like yeah, it happened. The Black Sea inundation, the land, the land bridge between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean collapsed and it flooded. The people that lived there, you know, got washed away. Some of those people went over the hills into West Asia, and a couple thousand years later, the Epic of Gilgamesh is written, which had the first flood story. A couple thousand years after that, or 3,000 years after that, the Old Testament is written, or the Torah, which had the flood story of Noah, you know. And so, like I said, does it make it true, the Bible? No. It just means that they reported in a really roundabout way something that actually happened, but not exactly. You feel me? Like God wasn't mad, you know. Like it was a land bridge that collapsed and washed away the people that were living there, you know. Anyways, though, like I said, there's only one truth and there's a lot of perspectives. And that's my official stance on this. So, namaste, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next post.